Hi there, welcome to our third podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the Aristotle's reading, both of them. So Reagan's going to start us off with some questions.
All right, so what does Aristotle say are elements for a happy life? He lists 3. They are virtuous, intelligence, and kindness. What do you guys think of that?
I'd say that definitely virtues are pretty essential for like a happy life. I feel like if you have good virtues, then ultimately you're going to feel happier as a person because you're doing things to kind of benefit society with your virtues, which is kind of going to come back in like forms of blessings, I think. So I think that is probably pretty important.
Yeah, I think he also talks about how the supreme good is the ultimate goal, but then he also touches on how happiness is a little different because happiness doesn't have an end goal, and I thought that was really interesting because I never really thought about it that way. So I liked that aspect of it, and just how he talked about happiness in general, in a lot of different ways and being different. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I really like his the 3 elements, and what I took from them. I think they all, kind of like Bree said, come together to make a happy life. I think you do need all 3, like he kind of mentions. And yeah, I just thought they were really interesting aspects. I don't think if someone were to ask what I need for a happy life, wouldn't think to state those, although they are very important.
Yeah, and how he's saying that happiness has to do with flourishing. It's not necessarily one thing, but it has to do with growing, and it's more of a state of being, not necessarily doing.
Yeah, I think happiness there, like he said, there really isn't an end goal because there's not one true state of happiness because what really can define that,
So I'm going to jump to this question because I think it kind of relates to what we're talking about. So do you think there is a universal definition to happiness?
No.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think there is. I think what makes one person happy isn't going to make some other person happy. So it's there can't really be one thing that makes everyone happy. I think that happiness is also something that is an emotion that we feel not all the time. I think happiness isn't really permanent. It can be very fleeting. So
I think happiness is different for everybody, but it also can be so simple. You have a kid and you give them a piece of candy and that kid is super happy, and it's so simple, but that can be all it takes for happiness for someone. But it can also be super complex, you get your degree and you're extremely happy, or you get the job you really wanted, and that's happiness for some people. But I think some people focus on happiness as being this huge thing that you work towards, but I think happiness can be broken down into so many little things, and it can be multiple things, not just one thing. I think happiness is everywhere, and I think Aristotle kind of talks about that in a lot of different ways, how it's kind of everywhere. It's not just one, as he said, it's not an end goal. It's growing, it's working towards things, and we should celebrate the little victories in a way with happiness.
Yeah, I think the question, there is obviously a technical definition to happiness. So I think we can all agree on that term. But I think individual happiness is so subjective, and you said something that may make me happy might not make her happy, and vice versa. And I think that kind of what you were both saying is you have to look at the overall picture, because yes, there are moments of happiness. Everyone experiences happiness at some point, but you may not be happy all the time. Someone who is experiencing depression, they're allowed to have moments of happiness, but overall, would they say they're a happy person in that particular period of their time? Probably not. Again, what you guys were saying, it comes and goes, and to everybody that coming and going is so different. And in the reading, I like how it touched on too, how do you know if someone's truly happy? And I think it mentioned something about looking at do you really know until you're at the end of your life? And I think that's a really good point too, because like, I know there were some times where, like, I genuinely thought that I was like, oh, yeah, like, I'm happy, I'm doing well. And then, like, once I got out of that period of my life, I was like, I experienced happiness, but was I really happy during that period of time? No.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point from the reading, too, is, like, do you really know if you're happy or not until you have the whole picture?
Yeah, or until, like, you feel a different version of happiness, do you know what happiness was? Because I've also had times where I thought I was happy, but then I get happier, or I look back and I'm like, no, I wasn't happy. I was pretending to be happy.
Yeah.
And that's a lot different. I also kind of think that it lines up with success, where people think that success is the same thing as happiness when it's not, because you don't have to be successful to be happy. It's similarly defined that, you know, success is different for everybody, but success and happiness don't have to correlate.
I think it's also like the things that can make you happy can also make you like some of the most sad. Like one minute you could find that like, oh, something really happened, like really happy happened to you, or like exciting or something, but then like there's all this other stuff that comes along with it that's pretty negative. So it's like there's two sides to everything. So I think that like even that's why it's like so subjective, because some things that can make you like super excited can also let you down the most. So
Yeah, going off that, I think it's kind of like love, like there's different areas to love. Like the same way I love my husband isn't the same way I love my mom. Just like with happiness, like the same way you're happy about one thing, you may not be happy about another. In this reading, they also talk a lot about virtues and being virtuous. Would you guys consider yourself a virtuous people? I know personally I would like to think so. I would like to think that I do everything with like good intent and, you know, I try to do good, but I don't know that like I would consider myself virtuous just with like all the like characteristics and guidelines that have been laid out. Like I don't necessarily know that I meet all those, or I don't know that I could meet all those yet. Like we were talking about in class, when he had his children, he's like, they're too young to even, you know, be virtuous. Like, am I still too young to like know if I'm virtuous or capable of being virtuous?
I think it's possible like that people have some virtues but not others.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just, I mean, we're human beings. We cannot check all of those boxes. And like, if you just seek to check all of those virtue boxes, then you're not even like doing it for the right reason. You're doing it to check all the boxes. So then it's like full circle defeating the purpose. But I think that it is very like possible to be like compassionate and everything like that. Like, and some of those virtues, but not all of them, and I think that's okay because we're all different. And if we all had the same virtues, we'd all probably be pretty annoyed with each other for some reason. I just think that's how the world goes round.
And I think we kind of like, in that same like respect, we kind of like compensate for that. Like if I'm like, say I'm really compassionate and you're really like driven, like maybe my compassion makes up for like your drivenness, you know, like it balances.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of can be virtuous in their own way and also not virtuous, and I think that's okay. And I think a big thing too is when you try to be virtuous, you're kind of defeating the purpose, because as Aristotle kind of says, someone who's virtuous does it for the right reasons, and you know, they don't focus on
the reward that comes with being virtuous. So I think there's a bit of a balance, and it's okay to not be there yet, or you know, to still be learning to be virtuous, or still. And you shouldn't do it just for like the title of virtue, like you mentioned.
And I think working like on having that virtue is like let's say I wanted to be more compassionate, but you know, I wanted to do it just because like I genuinely wanted to be a more compassionate person, not because like
you're like, oh, I need to meet this requirement too.
It's you know, but like then you would start practicing acts of compassion in order to have that virtue, but it's like there's such that difference. So
I think that's a really good point too. Like you should want to improve yourself as a person for other people, not just to be like, oh yes, this will, you know, make me supreme,
or even like this will make me happy because I'm doing this. Like,
you have to want it for you, not for like the title that comes with it.
Yeah, when it's for betterment for yourself or others, that's when it's different than, you know, when it's for the title or for something else.
Definitely. And one last question. Do you guys think humans do everything with good intention? Like mentioned?
No.
Also, no.
No, not at all.
I want to say that like the majority of people have good intentions the majority of the time. But I think that even the most like selfless, kind person still does things that maybe without good intention. I don't want to say like ill intent, but maybe just
The wrong intention.
Yeah.
And maybe even sometimes on accident.
I was
Yeah.
Like
gonna
we were
say, they
discussing
may
in
not always
class.
know it, but
But yeah.
sometimes that's,
because I know
what
like
happens.
I've accidentally hurt people's feelings or done the wrong
Yeah.
thing, and obviously I didn't like mean to, but
Yeah.
obviously I wasn't going into it thinking like, yes, this is great, this is good for
Yeah.
them, this is good for me.
Yeah.
But I also didn't like, was not out to be malicious or,
Yeah. I think unfortunately we all can be a little selfish, and I think that's where not bad intentions, but I think that's where the good intention line gets a little crossed sometimes, because when you do things with selfish purpose, you kind of don't consider other people, and you don't consider where your actions are gonna lie. And I think that's where some good intentions go awry.
Yeah, and I think like going off that, like we were saying, like we don't always do things with good, but there are definitely people who do things like just to hurt others.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think everyone does everything with good intention. I don't think
Yeah.
everyone does everything with bad intention, but there
Yeah.
are definitely some people who are
Yeah.
just like malicious.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's kind of a mix of everything.
Yeah. So overall, the conclusion is no, humans do not do everything with good intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed our podcast. We'll be back next time.